Steve Moran here with Senior Living Foresight. I'm really excited to have you here. I'm excited to be talking to Ken Dychtwald, my friend Ken Dychtwald. We're going to talk about how he sees senior living. But first off, I got to run a little clip for you. Welcome to Foresight TV, where we provide leadership food for the soul, helping senior living organizations have higher occupancy, lower turnover, and better cultures. Today's episode is made possible through the generous support of Connected Living, a technology company that helps senior living communities effectively communicate with residents, families, and team members. Here's today's show. Ken, welcome. I am really delighted. I love talking to you. You are probably the most significant change agent in the country, maybe in the world, when it comes to us boomers who are aging. I'm going to start with that. Why don't you tell us what we should know about you, and then we're going to dig into some interesting questions.
Well, what you should know about me, I got interested in this field of aging in 1974 when I was 24. I spent my first 15 years in the not-for-profit sector setting up preventative health research projects having to do with older people, and then became really intrigued with aging as distinct from the elderly. And then I was kind of a hippie guy, long hair, earrings, yoga pants, and I decided that I was struggling in the not-for-profit world. It seemed like there was never any money and you were always groveling. So I decided I would try to see if I could pay my own way. So I set up a company, AgeWave, 1986, 6 years ago. And I've had a great run. Written 18 books, given talks to about 2.5 million people. I've had half the Fortune 500 as clients. And I would have to say that I turned 70 during COVID. So here I was, a 24-year-old guy talking about when the boomers get older. And here I am, white hair.
So how old do you feel?
I feel 70. Yeah, but it's a funny thing because there are some camps that say you're supposed to want to be young. And I think that's a little bit crazy. My kids are 30. If they said they wanted to be 4 again, I would take them to the psychiatrist. On the other hand, I don't want to be elderly. So I'm trying to constitute in my own mind kind of a new notion of what it is to be an elder, what it is to be mature and older and the power that comes with that. And also, partly this last year, I've been writing and speaking out a lot, not just about the power that comes with being an older person, but the responsibility and the obligation. I've come to believe, Steve, that I don't think the idea is you hit 65 and you're off. I think the world could use some grown-ups. And I think that whether it's an hour a day or a day a week or something, volunteering and being a part of the community and helping younger people, and particularly with what's gone on with COVID, I feel that there are obligations and responsibilities of being a grown-up. And I think that more older people are feeling that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that, there are so many things that I don't know whether I'm wiser or smarter about today at 66 than I was when I was even 40 or 50. But there's a part of me that says, well, I wish I were younger and doing what I'm doing because see so much opportunity. But I don't know that I had the skills or the knowledge or the wisdom to do that. And so I'm with you. I really embrace the age I'm at. I guess I don't feel like I think 66-year-olds should feel, but the world's really changed on that. So
yeah, and I'd say that you and I were kindred spirits in this regard. When my grandparents were my age, they were old people. I mean, really old people. They thought old, they dressed old, they acted old, they weren't particularly interested in anything new. And they were waiting for the end to come because that's what people did when they reached this age. But I think, like so many people in our cohort, we've read enough articles now to realize that we might have a year or 20, maybe more in front of us. And we're at the top of our game in a lot of ways. And frankly, also during COVID, as I'm sure you've noticed, our research has turned it out dramatically that it's really rough being a young person right now. I mean, the 20 and 30-year-olds in this country are getting battered. They're losing their jobs. They have lost their health insurance. They're trying to work from home. Their kids are missing their playmates. And so having a certain amount of freedom from a lot of that and a certain amount of emotional intelligence as a grown-up, it's not such a bad time to be an older person.
No, I agree. And I think the other part of it that I found is that the people who are plus 60 seem to be more sanguine about COVID because they've seen other terrible things happen in their lifetimes. You and I are old enough that we're on sort of the tail end of the horrible polio crisis, right? Which is why people in senior living communities, the residents, are mostly getting it because they've seen the damage. And as terrible as it is, it's not really as bad as that in terms of what kind of impact it had on the society. At least that's my view. And I was kind of a little kid when that happened, but
yeah, I was 3 when, and I actually wound up doing a book with Jonas Salk when I was 30. So I know a lot about his breakthrough. And I'm going to relate that to what we're going to talk about in a few minutes regarding cognitive loss and Alzheimer's. But the 1940s, poliomyelitis was rampant and it was contagious. And people didn't understand what were its mechanisms, how did it work? And so partly the response was that nobody would touch strangers. And you didn't want people from the other side of town swimming in your pool in the public pool in the summer, and water fountains, people wouldn't drink out of them because you'd catch polio. And there were iron lungs that people got their bodies stuck in, and you'd have to lie in that thing for the rest of your life. And there was a mirror here and they fed you through it. And it was horrible. And a lot of people thought in the future, we're going to need more iron lungs. And Salk and then Sabin said, no, we got to wipe this disease out. And I'm one of those who feels we got to take the same point of view about Alzheimer's. Instead of envisioning a future where 1 out of every 2 older people's got dementia, I'd rather envision a future in which it's been wiped out and people are free of that horror, that fear. So, yeah, I think that I want to say one other thing too from research. We did this last year, Steve, that older people also have some safety nets that younger people don't, and they've worked this year. If you're over 65, you got Medicare, which is not perfect, but its market value is about $12,000 a year. And the average single person payoff from Social Security last year was $18,000, which is not going to make you rich, but it's better than nothing. And so there's a little bit of financial fortitude that older people have that younger people don't. Also, exactly as you say, that you've lived 50 or 60 or 70 years, you've been to a few rodeos, and maybe I was there with the death of my mom and my dad different times, and I've had businesses fail. And I'm not saying my hardship is worse than somebody else's, but I've had some rough times and some good times. And I can look at this virus and put it in some kind of perspective. And the perspective also has to do with my own gratitude for the life I've had. Younger people, they don't have that kind of safety net or perspective yet. And so they're getting banged around like crazy. I think it's a time that older people are being noticed for their fortitude right now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So let's get to the topic that I really want to dig into for my particular audience. I, as a thought leader in senior living, and many other people who are not directly in senior living, like you and Chip Conley and David Stewart and others, and people like Bob Kramer, right? We have some concerns about what the current, how appealing the current model of senior living is going to be to boomers. And if we're honest about it, we only, even for the silent generation, maybe tapping 10% of the potential people who could move in, which suggests there's some image problems even there. And so somebody who's studied this, where are the opportunities, the dangers, what are the challenges? When you think about senior living, what are you thinking?
Yeah, and as you know, Bob Kramer and myself and Colin Milner and Rich Carmona chaired a task force this past year to try to figure out the future of this whole thing. So I learned a lot from that. But here's the way it looks to me. I think calling things senior living is a double mistake. First of all, we know that boomers don't like the word senior. So enough, I know that there's a lot of companies that trade on the stock market and they're called senior this, senior that. You use the word a lot. I've used it a lot. It's obsolete. The other thing is that it's not one thing. And I think partly it confuses people. Senior living, what is that? Is that where everybody's dying of COVID, or is that where you can play golf and tennis and have a lot of fun? And so let me break it the way I see it. I think there's three different categories. One is active living, where people over 50 or 55 decide they might like to live in some kind of a planned community or in some kind of a communal housing. Golden Girls was an interesting futuristic show where a group of women live together in order to share costs and help care for each other. But let's look at the communities. I think they're going to boom. I don't think everybody wants to live in an age-specific community, but I think that a lot of people have realized that, wow, they miss people this last year. They like socializing. They like connecting. They like the kind of conveniences and almost like hotel or resort style amenities that a lot of communities offer. Keep in mind, too, that there's a lot of older adults today that are alone and maybe don't even have children at all or that live nearby. And so I think that there's going to be a burst of people who are going to want to find their way into the communities that cater to their needs and interests. But there's a caveat. Previous generations, their dream in retirement was to have like a vacation, play golf, go swimming, eat a lot, like a cruise trip or a trip to a holiday resort. Boomers are different. They want to volunteer. They want to find purpose. They want to go back to school. They want to have stimulating discussions. They want to be around young people. So the communities of the future, which have largely been kind of inbred, that's not going to fly. The communities of the future are going to have to plug more into intergenerational programs, provide opportunities for volunteerism, create more of a mind life rather than just a social life. So that's one category. And I think that there's big times coming in that regard. Second, there's the whole area of communities that provide some assistance. And I have to tell you that having talked about this zone for decades now with people in the general community, nobody knows what they are. Wait a minute, is that like a memory care unit, or is that a nursing home, or is that they just don't get it. What's assisted living and how does it work? And do I have my own apartment or am I roomed with other people? It's very confusing. And so the field has done a really modest job of marketing itself in captivating ways. And some brands are better than other brands. Some do a crummy job and others are spectacular. And they really ought to start separating themselves out. I want to show you a couple of slides, just two. So we're going to see if we can make this work.
Perfect. Right, here we go. Let's see.
All right, here they come. Okay, here's a very important, can you see this, Steve?
Absolutely, yep, you can see this.
This is a very important issue that's going to be a major topic of discussion in healthcare, and it's going to work its way into housing. We often talk about life expectancy, and as you can see, the United States is very middling. There's about 33 countries in the world that have a higher life expectancy than we do. By the way, life expectancy for the first time in decades actually went backwards this year. It dropped by about a year. That's at birth. If you look at life expectancy at age 65, it's about 85. So the life expectancy at birth numbers can confuse older adults because they think, well, I'm 72, I got a few years to go. And that's not the right number for you. But equally important is this notion of health span, which is a new concept that people like myself and you have been introducing, and it's catching on. And that is, how many of my years of life am I going to be kind of healthy and independent? And as you can see, we're terrible in the United States. With all the money we spend on our healthcare system, more than any other developed country in the world, we spend a lot of years falling apart. We spent a lot of years with heart disease and cancer and Alzheimer's and diabetes and all sorts of things with falls and broken hips and pelvises. And so if we make no changes, it's going to mean that a lot of older people are going to need some support and assistance in, keeping their apartment or their home tidy, or running errands, or getting them in and out of the doctor's office. And so there will be a need for assistance, no question. And I think it needs to be promoted to boomers who don't want to ever think of themselves as being elderly, in a way that makes them feel like it's kind of concierge, it's kind of adding value, it's kind of making their lives more comfortable and more secure. Also, even in that second category of housing with assistance, these people are still going to want a more stimulating life. The internet, for example, we were stunned going into COVID at how few assisted living facilities even had Wi-Fi, how few were set up for telemedicine. They were kind of stuck back in the 90s. But take a look at this. I've never shown this slide publicly before, and I've never had it put together before, but I asked my researcher to show me what this looks like. We've heard about the age wave. Of course, I've been yakking about it forever. And we've often thought about in terms of the growth in the number of 50 and 60-year-olds. But when you project from last year for 20 years, the massive growth that's going on in America, and by the way, in almost all the modernized nations of the world, is because of the baby boom that happened after World War II. And that is going to be a massive growth in the number of people over the age of 75. And so the need for assistance, the need for additional support, the need for telemedicine, the desire for wellness, the desire for mental stimulation, the desire for learning, the desire for love and friendship and input in the community is not going to go away. So we're going to have a whole new group of older adults, very different than the ones that the industry has created and catered to. Now, let me remove this so I don't distract you. And let me tell you about the third category. The third category, I think, has taken a beating during COVID, and that's skilled nursing facilities and the like, memory care centers. And I must say that I saw the AARP coverage, and I know the industry was kind of torched, but my feeling is, yeah, there's some bad players. And they, by the way, they ought to be shut down. But the fact that 1% of the American population lives in such facilities, communities, but that's where 43% of the COVID deaths happen. That's an interesting thing to stop and think about. So here's how I unpack it very briefly. First of all, if we were more committed to loving and caring for and setting up our lives to care for our moms and dads, our elders, there wouldn't be so many people in skilled nursing facilities. So it's a little bit on the whole population that so many people wind up there. Second, if we took more seriously Alzheimer's disease, which honestly is the big pandemic coming next, we wouldn't have all those people in the memory care centers because they'd be cognitively healthy and still maybe working and playing and living normal lives. So shame on us and our leaders and our medical system and our scientific community for having Alzheimer's disease be so much of an outlier in terms of the primary attention of our scientific community. And third, when having spent a lot of my working career working in skilled nursing facilities and also being very familiar with this category, I thought, wow, when those amazing doctors and nurses were showing up in the early months of COVID and we were calling out to get them protective gear and to treat them as heroes, I thought, what about the men and women that are working in our assisted living and long-term care facilities? How come they're not getting protective gear? And a lot of those people are so underpaid, they have second jobs and they're so unresourced that they're living at home with 2 and 3 generations. And they're most likely to catch COVID. You know, they're often people of color. And so I feel that what this COVID has revealed are those facilities must be right up there with hospitals and essential services in terms of having protective gear. They must have mechanisms for allowing family members to visit in a safe way, because those pictures were horrifying. And I can't tell you how many people are now saying, I never want to be in a skilled nursing facility or assisted living or memory care. I want to be at home. And so the home care industry is taking off like a rocket. But if that particular sector of what used to be called senior living is to have a future, they've really got to get out in front of being able to be more thoughtful, being more prioritized in terms of protective gear. And they're going to have to pay their workers more and take better care of them, because those are high risk environments. So what do I think? I think that with the aging of the population and the boomers increasingly passing their 70th and 75th birthday, this is a time that category, your category, Steve, has been waiting for. But there's going to need to be some changes for people to get it right.
So what are the changes? So let's assume that and you've got senior living operators, significant operators who are watching this and listening to this. And you've got an opportunity to say to them, these are, based on my breadth of experience and this whole process of aging and boomers, what are those things that you think where there are opportunities to make it better? What would you ask them? What would you want them to do? And maybe as a way to frame that, what's the senior living in a community like that you'd like to live in when you get to be 80, 85, or 90?
First of all, my wife and I love living in our home, but it's a lot of work and we're very isolated. And so we've thought more and more about maybe we ought to move. And I didn't imagine we'd ever think about that. I'm not personally drawn, I'm being honest, to a community where everybody's my age. I think there's something kind of Twilight Zone about that. I know that a certain percentage of the population, that's their dream come true. It was for my mom and dad. It is for my brother. But to attract me, I'd probably want to be near a college town. And I'd probably want there to be a wellness component. Maybe if you could take a little bit of what Canyon Ranch offers, and so that I know that I'm actually going to get more fit rather than fall apart. I want there to be opportunities where I can activate myself to be a volunteer and an elder, contributing to people and kids maybe in the neighborhood, in the community, or in other ways. I want that to be made easy for me. I'm also a really curious guy, so I don't want to just sit around and watch kind of dopey TV all day long, although I've watched quite a lot of that this year. I'd like to feel that I'm kind of learning again. So fitness, wellness, contribution, learning, and because unfortunately for the industry, many of us have traveled a lot and we've been in some crummy facilities, hotels, resorts, cruise ships, and some grand ones. And so we know what really great service is. I want the service to be amazing. If you've ever stayed at a Four Seasons, and I've stayed at a couple, you've tasted great service. So if I were to move into a community where the service is kind of not so great, not going to work. And so a combination of wellness, up attitude, compensated and respectful staff that are trained in hospitality at the highest levels, stimulating life of the mind, and a chance to be not isolated and segregated. But even if we're living in a community or a building, how do we get involved in the larger community, particularly people of other ages? I would say, too, that I think that there's an irrelevance that sets in when people are only around folks their own age. They just sort of lose connection with, who's Billie Eilish and what's TikTok and how does Zoom work? And you become a dinosaur. And so I think that the communities of the future are going to need to have people be modernized and relevant to the modern age. And that can be done with great programs. Not that hard to do.
Yep. So I have to ask, have you made a TikTok yet?
I made one with my daughter when COVID first started.
I've got an account.
I can tell you that I spend about an hour a day on TikTok. I'm a TikTok head, and mostly I'm fascinated by it because it's entertaining, but also the production chops that people are demonstrating. For those of us in the speaking business, watching these people try out juxtapositions and fast forwards and backs and overlays, it's like, wow, there's millions of people now that are becoming professional producers. And TikTok, I've never seen anything happen faster, and TikTok is a lot of fun. It
is. It absolutely is. I I think I tried one that may be sitting on my TikTok account. I haven't really pushed it out, sort of playing, but I love TikTok too. So I have a model, and I've written about this. And my dream, let me tell you my dream senior living, and it sounds like it might be yours too. I'm waiting for some developer to go find a big piece of land really next to a university. I don't want it to be on the campus because I think it's so hard to work with campuses to do that. But you see a lot of off-campus housing. And my dream is that on one side, they build a high-rise student housing. Then they have a core where they have dining and activities directions, maybe a mentoring center. And on the other side, you have senior living. So that when the parties go in, there's a separation, and when you want to go to bed early, you can do that. But if you want to come out and hang out with the kids, even at 2 o'clock in the morning with their party, you can do that as well. And I think everybody would benefit for it. And I think there's money in something like that. I've written about it a lot. Nobody seems to be taking it. Maybe we should go raise some money and go do it ourselves. I don't know. But it would be an interesting idea.
First of all, I like your idea. I also want to say this publicly. I've known you now a number of years, and man, did you come alive during COVID. You're stepping out and putting on that first conference at the beginning of COVID, and then all the programs you do and the ideas you're generating. It's like, here you are in your mid-60s, kind of reinvented yourself to become maybe the most powerful and influential thought leader in the field. So kudos to you, my friend.
Well, thank you. I will tell you, when we did that first conference, I felt so blessed. If we'd had to pay you and people like Kim Scott and Matt Paxton your usual speaker fees, we would have never been able to put it on. And so people like you were so generous.
Most people in the field, in most fields, were kind of hiding out. They were like scared by everything. They did nothing. Your bravery and your willing desire, I didn't want to get paid. I just wanted to be part of your team, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that we got some pretty nasty emails about how dare you do this in the time of crisis. And our feeling was there's never a time, if you're in a time of crisis, that's where you've got to have some hope. And that's what it was all about. So it was amazing. Okay. We don't have a lot of time yet, but you're a 2-book guy this year, right? And one is out. Why don't you just give us the title of it? Because I actually want to talk more about the second one that's coming out. So
maybe it's because I didn't have to do my usual 200,000 miles of flying this last year, but I wrote 2 books. This is based on 10 years worth of work. It's What Retirees Want, a holistic view of life's third age. By the way, a PBS special with the name Life's Third Age is going to be airing nationwide everywhere starting in March. So keep an eye out for that. All the proceeds from this book are being donated to the American Society on Aging. So I'm not making any money. It's a give back project. And I finished a memoir that I've been working on for 6 years. And it's coming out in April, and it's already getting all kinds of crazy attention. I had a call this morning about, do I want to make it into a movie? And by the way, all my proceeds from this book are being donated to Esalen Institute in Big Sur, which has taken a hard beating during COVID. So what do you want to know about this? We only have a minute or so.
Here's what I think I want to know out of that. I can already tell it's my kind of book, right? You sent me a copy of the first book. I've read it. It's wonderful. It's something that every senior living operator, every senior living leader should be reading. But to me, a radical curiosity is who I am. And so tell us the story out of it. I assume it's a storybook.
When my dad passed away about 7 years ago, I was with him his last night, and I don't know, I was at peace with his passing. He lived 93 years. He was a good man. His body was given up. He was done. But as a guy, all kinds of stuff started moving around inside of me, and I thought, I just finished a big study on the importance of leaving a legacy to your children, of your stories and your lessons, not just your stories. Hey, once I went to a football game, but what have you learned in your life? So I decided I was going to spend the next several years gathering the most interesting stories and lessons of my life for my kids to have. And maybe one day if they have kids, and maybe one day if they have kids. And, Eric Erickson said, in fact, that's what people ought to be doing in their mid-60s, which is stitching together the story of their life and passing it along as a legacy. But along the way, I realized, well, I got a pretty kooky life. I mean, I dropped out of school, studied physics, and dropped in and lived in Big Sur during the summer of love, and wrote my first book, Body Mind, when I was 22. And I've been mentored by Jimmy Carter and Betty Friedan, and met Nelson Mandela, and I've had big successes and big failures. And people started hearing about this, what I was writing for my kids, and they said, whoa, man, you ought to make that into a available book, because you're an embedded guy from a moment in time, and you've been driven by so much curiosity in your life. Maybe that would be interesting to young people too, because we live in a world that a lot of curiosity is being suppressed by everybody finding the answers on Google, or weird people in the White House that don't want you to think. And now we've got one in who wants you to think again. But so I'm hoping that the book is fun for people, and it's the memoir style, and it's like nothing I've ever done before. All my other books were kind of me hiding out in here writing about the age wave, but this one you get to hear about my crazy life and what I learned and where I failed and how I've made the transition to being an elder, or trying to anyhow. It's kind of my journey from Newark to Big Sur to Davos to elderhood is kind of what it is.
Cool. So do you have one story or one life lesson? We're getting close to essentially out of time, but I'd love to have one quick story or one life lesson.
When I first started working with older people, and when I was 24, we started the SAGE project. I asked people I just made it up, take a piece of graph paper, chart your life. And they all came back, and you saw lines going up and down, and decades where people felt there was nothing good that happened. And what they taught me then was, here's the deal. You need to take the time to do the things that really matter in your life, and don't be in a hurry. You really want to savor it. On the other hand, it's over like that. So you got to live your life with an intensity and an urgency, and don't waste time with people that don't matter and work that doesn't matter, and do the things that matter. Otherwise, you'll be an old person looking back and having a lot of regrets. And so I call that the paradox. Take your time, go slow, and on the other hand, it's all over really fast. And that was one of the lessons I learned as a young man, and I'm grateful for that. Being with old people as a young person gave me a chance to see how they looked back at life. And it was almost like hearing the answers before I even knew what the questions were. And there's more in there also. But learned some big lessons from Jimmy Carter, and learned a big lesson from Nelson Mandela, which is in the book as well.
That is terrific. I will tell you that I 100% agree with you that we've got to live with intention, that it goes by so fast. And I find more and more I stay away from people who are negative and who are, not living life to the fullest. I've got a number of relationships where people are oriented that way, and they're important relationships. So I spend a little bit of time, but I don't spend a lot of time there because it just drags me down. And frankly, it's easy to get trapped into that. So we are about out of time. How do people actually, let me talk about this banner I put up, and then let's talk about how to find you.
Easy to find me.
Starting a community.
My company is AgeWave. So just go to the agewave.com. It's easy to find. Just type it in anywhere on the internet, and it'll take you to our website, and my contact information is right there.
Right. And your books are on Amazon.
Barnes & Noble, anywhere you want. Radical Curiosity, One Man's Search for Cosmic Magic and a Purposeful Life. Proceeds going to Esalen. And What Retirees Want, A Holistic View of Life's Third Age. And check your local public television stations starting in March to see when Life's Third Age will be airing in your community. And if you run a senior living community, you may want to have your residents watch it, because I've been hearing from older people who have seen the premiere of it that it really was encouraging and powerful program for them. So
that is really cool. So we have started a little text community. Not going to use it for advertising, but we'll send you some bonus material along the way. Just text to 916-659-5287, the word TV. And we haven't actually started sending out messages in it, but we will do that this coming week. We'd love to have you be a part of that community, and you can communicate with us back. So send me a text message there, your thoughts, your ideas, your concerns, and you will get a response. I am reading them all. So Ken, thank you very, very much. I thank you for being a guest, but even more than that, I really thank you for moving our whole country forward in this idea of what it means to grow older and be an elder and live a powerful, strong life. So again, I just really, really appreciate that. And with that, I am going to sign off to the audience. Ken, you'll still be on with me, so we can say goodbye. But with that, thank you very much for watching. Appreciate all the comments. Normally, I get to put those up on the screen, but it was such a fascinating conversation, I didn't do that. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Be safe.